recording.
Yeah. Okay, great. So this is this data science in this is meeting. Okay, good. Just letting me know that this is being recorded. Data science incubator meetup on how to use our Azure board from an RStudio server. Actually, in particular, we are using RStudio server on the cloud. But I'm going to explain basically what we are doing and why the format today is a little different. So for those who are joining now, the first thing that we will need to do is to go to the link that you see on screen. I'm showing my screen, so it might be kind of under some of your windows. The link is here, bit.ly DSI pin Azure. Also, Jackson shared that link on the chat and on Slack, I think. So that's the first thing. And then once you get there, please sign in by just typing your name here. And the reason we want that is because this meetup is going to have a different format. It's going to be a little workshop, like a tiny taste for what the workshop will be about master the tidyverse. So today we're not going to be talking about master the tidyverse, but we are going to use the same format so that you experience that format. So basically, this is a collaborative document. Everyone can edit this document. The first thing you need to do is to sign in there, and we use that to see how many people is achieving the little tasks that we give you. So today, beyond learning something, I wanted to mostly share this system so that we get used to it and we are kind of ready to hit the ground running when we run the actual workshop, which, by the way, may happen around in a month and a half from now. I'm going to share the a link to vote when we can when it kind of works best for everyone. As usual, it's best to kind of keep yourself muted, and we are going to be interacting with me and with Jackson mostly on writing more than speaking. So you will see that the document has a number of sections. You can navigate those sections from the here on the left. The document has the outline view. Depending on how much you zoom in or out, you will be able to see that or not. The goal of the meetup today is to try this system for managing data that includes Azure to store data remotely. Also, an RStudio server, which in this case is going to be an RStudio, an instance of rstudio.cloud. And that we are going to be using that server because in conversations with Alex and with Taylor, they reminded me that one way in which we could share big files, for example, without the need of reading them through the internet, is just by using a server, like an RStudio server instance, which we have. Now we kind of killed it because we haven't been using it, but I think I'm going to revive it. And also we are going to be using the pins package, which I presented before, but now interacted with Azure. So that's the goal of the meetup today, beyond presenting you the system. So the first, you will see that each section has a question. So if anything is unclear in any section, just go ahead and there and type, what's your question there. For now, and I see that some people join a little later, make sure you are on this document. You can access this doc by going to this link, and make sure that you open rstudio.cloud with this link here. So I'm going to go to that project on rstudio.cloud. And the first thing I would like you to do is to open the file that says 00 intro RMD, which is an introduction to the system that we're going to use, and also, like, as an excuse, an introduction to R Markdown. Many of you are already familiar, but mostly it's to get a hang of what the workflow for the meetup is. So basically I present an objective for a particular lesson. So this is the lesson about the introduction to R Markdown. The objective is to run an R Markdown code chunk. So your work is to navigate down to line 21 and press play here, so that you can run the chunk and you see the output here on the R Markdown. So that's just an excuse. And when you are doing that, when you're done, you go ahead and click yes on Zoom, and we should see as many yeses as people have signed in the Google Doc. And then also, as an exercise to try, what it feels to write a question in writing other than verbally, then also write just anything like hi, for example, in the relevant section of the document. So you would be doing what I just did, click run here. Then you go to the document, you go to the relevant section, which is the intro, and you just here in question, you say hi. And you also in Zoom click yes, which I'm gonna do right now. So go ahead, I also time the activities. I'm gonna give only just 1 minute or less, maybe 30 seconds, because that's a fairly quick exercise. So please go ahead, because it's mostly not so much about learning RMAC. It's mostly to get a hang of the system. Doing something, then immediately saying yes, I have accomplished the goal, and then going to the document and asking a question if you have one. So basically, it's just to experience the workflow.
Just as a reminder, when you're done, click on the participants button in the bottom of Zoom, and there should be an option to vote yes in the actual participants bar, rather than sending it in the chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Jackson. Good. You're gonna get to practice this a few more times today. So usually the tasks don't end when everyone is ready. We don't expect that everyone will always do every task because some tasks are more challenging than others, and some tasks are going to take longer, but that's totally fine. That's totally expected. So we are done with 00, so I can close that file. The next one is 01, is set up an Azure board. This is a little bit more realistic and challenging. So the objective is for you to have the setup that you need to access a place where we store data sets on Azure. For now, it's a kind of test Azure board, so it's not super private. We are probably going to destroy that. But your task is to open in rstudio.cloud, open your R environment file, and you do that with a function use this edit R environment. And then when you are done with that, you add what you see here on the screen, except that at the end, this is a fake password. The real password I pasted on the chat. So maybe so that it doesn't show up on my screen, I'm gonna ask Jackson to paste it again on the chat, because I know that some people join a little later. So if you, Jackson, see it, copy it and paste it again on the same chat. So go ahead, I'm gonna give you a minute to do this, and then I'm gonna show it myself. So if you don't accomplish this, that's fine. You're gonna see it in a minute from now. And when you're done, as usually, click yes on the participants panel. If you have any questions, of course, ask in the doc. And Jackson is monitoring the questions, so he's trying to answer live. And if he can't because he's busy with something else, later we are gonna make sure that every question gets answered. We have another 10 seconds to go, and I'm gonna show how to do this particular challenge. So the R environment file is a file that usually you don't store in your project, which is a great idea if you are if you need to kind of store some kind of secret that cannot be, say, pushed to GitHub in a public repo. So what you do then is you open that file, and you can open it in many ways, but a very easy way to do it is with function use this edit R environment. So if you just run that function, that will open a file like the one you see here. So what you see is the code that I shared with you on the file here. So I'm gonna show you what this looks like. So for Azure, the setup that you need is just these 3 lines: line 19, line 20, which are exactly like that, and line 22, which Jackson shared on the chat. So how that looks like, it looks like this in your environment. So you just paste that code there. This is a series of key and value pairs. And the key here you will have to replace with your real value. I'm not showing it on screen because this is being recorded and this is a private key. So with that set up, you need to make sure that the file ends with a new line. So there has to be a new line here, like line 5, for example, is empty here. And then you can save the file with a little disk icon. You can close it if you want, and then you can restart. You have to restart. To restart, for example, what I'm doing now is I'm pressing Shift Control F10, but you can also do it as you would normally do it. Maybe here in Session, you go in Restart R, and also it reminds you of the keyboard shortcut here. So that was the task. Jackson, can you tell me more or less how many people accomplished the task?
So we've got 3 or 4 yeses so far in the
Great.
participants. 5 now.
Great. This is also going to be recorded, so you can do this later on your own time. So this is done. So by the way, I'm going to show you that we can collapse little things here, and also we have in RMAC now we have outlines here that we can use to navigate a document. So that's something that you may as you become more familiar with RMAC down, that you may be using a lot today, but also in the workshop about mastering the tidyverse. That's how we navigate through the content. So you accomplished that task, great. So we can now close that file, and we are now going to work on the last file. It's called 02 use Azure board. And here is kind of the outline. The objectives of this file or this section of the lesson is to, let me expand this so it's kind of easier to see. Actually, this is one way, but then the other way could be to collapse things like this. I'm pressing Shift, Alt, and O, and that collapses all the headings. So basically, the objectives are described in the headings of each of these subsections. So the first thing we want to do is to use the pins package to register our Azure board. So we have already set it up. We now need to tell this particular document, this particular session that's going to be running in the RMAC down file, that we want to use that board that we have set up. Another objective is that we want to find data sets that exist now in our Azure board. Then we also want to get those data sets, or one of those data sets. Then we want to create a processed version of that raw data set and save it in our local cache. And by local here, I say quote local, because with the idea that Taylor and Alex gave me, on our RStudio server, we can share a cache. So if you create an output from a processed data set, that output can also be accessed not only by you, but also by other people, which is great because people don't need to recompute things. They can build on work that you have done before. Then we are gonna, I'm gonna show this, probably we are not gonna do this as an exercise. We are gonna visualize the structure of the cache that the server kind of hosts. All that machinery is built by pins, and you will see that in a moment. And then we are gonna reflect on some takeaway. So that's this lesson. So let me expand the first block. Let's see how we use pins to start using it. So the task is composed by 2 steps. When you want to use a package, you always need to do library and the name of the package, and then particularly how you register a board is with a specific function. So the pins package includes a number of functions to register different boards, and if you want to register an Azure board, this is the function that you need to call with no arguments. So your task now is pretty straightforward. Basically, do the 2 things that I say here on the section that you see here. So I'm gonna give a minute and see how we go. When you're ready, please say yes on the participants tab. That should produce no output, I believe. If there is no errors or anything, that might go silent, and that will still be a sign that things work well. Again, if you have questions, ask those questions in the relevant section. I'm going to actually navigate there to see how we're going. Okay, nothing so far. So this is how we usually go with Jackson. We could be teaching a lesson, and if anyone has a question while the activity is happening, someone will try on the fly to answer it, usually the one that is not talking. But if we can't answer the question on the fly, before the next break, we do go and answer the question. Okay, so the time is out now, and how many people did accomplish this task, Jackson?
We have 7 people.
Great. Okay, so that's straightforward. Of course, we are gonna register the Azure exactly as I described here at the top. Now we run this and we get no output, which is a sign that things work well. So the next section is more exciting. It's actually, well, how do we know that there is stuff in that board? So your task now is to search for a data set with the keyword empty cars. You could also use the keyword MTC or MT because it will just try match pins by name or by description. So please use the function. There's 3 ways in which you can find pins. I'm going to show it in a moment, but you can search in your RStudio Cloud interface for a tab called Connections and see if you can find it there. Also, there is usually an add-ins here. See if you can find your pins through the add-ins. And finally, do it programmatically here on the chunk. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes for that. Jackson, if you see everyone finishing early, just let me know and we stop.
Sounds good.
We have one more minute to go. A little more than that. As you can see, pins is very well supported by RStudio. That's why there is a tab that includes a visualization of the pins. There is also an add-in. Actually, RStudio develops pins, and that's why it has such a great support for it, which suggests that it seems like a safe tool to learn because it's gonna stay for a while, right? Given that they are giving it so much support. How are we going, Jackson?
We're at 5. We have 5 people going through it. 6.
Great. Okay. I will start kind of talking about the visual ways of exploring pins. As you can see in the connection tabs, there is pins here. You can see a bunch of boards. Packages always are there. Some packages contain pins that are accessible. There's always a local board that pin will create for you. When you pin anything outside, it will also create a local board, and we're going to explore it also. And then the Azure one. So that's where I can see that there is a package, a dataset called MT cars, and I could also filter it here. So I could click here on the icon to see what the dataset looks like. So that's done. I could also find here an add-in called Find Pins. Here it is. And now a similar interface, I can search specifically in one board if I wanted, say in the Azure board, and see what datasets I have. Here it is, the empty cars. And then finally, I want to, I want to use the programmatic way of doing it because this is how you would do it in your code. It's probably the one that it is more useful for you. And pins find will just search a database of potential dataset that you can access. So the next section is about getting that data. Pins has the function get, so pin get. So now we want to actually get that data set to do something. So imagine that you are working, you want to read from your R session, from your script, from your package, a data set that lives on Azure storage. And how do you go about that? Okay, you use the function ping get. We are getting close to the end of the meetup, so I'm gonna give only a few seconds here. It's kind of also straightforward. Let's run 1 minute and see how we go. Basically, what the hints that I'm giving here is, well, the challenge here is to use the function ping get with the name, and this name of the dataset goes in quotes because it's just like the name of it. It's not a variable, it's the name of the object. And you have to say in which board you want to read that dataset from. So the board is Azure. As I speak, I'm gonna start completing the task. You want to use the function ping get. And because I want to say, do something with that data set, I'm gonna just store it in my data. So if I now run this chunk, what I see is that effectively I have read that data set from my from Azure, right? Maybe it's reading it from a local cache, because if you read already this data set once, Pins is clever enough to create a local copy, so that next time it's gonna take like no time really. So this is the last little challenge here. The first part of it is to now modify that data set that we called my data, just to extract the first few rows with head. And then we are going to use that process. So with this, we are kind of pretending that we are running a very expensive computation on the data set. Here is just running the head. But you can imagine this is, could be a process that takes 1 hour to compute. And then you want to create a pin of the computed data set and store it in your local cache. And again, by local now is a server cache, because as Alex and Taylor suggested, we can use an RStudio server interface like the one we are doing to share the cache across to the AI users. So let's give you a few seconds, to maybe 30 seconds to give it a go, and then I'll do it because we are a little short of time. Okay, 30 seconds have passed. Jackson, do we have anyone complete the task?
Yeah, we got about 5 people.
Perfect. So we are going to call this small data. It's just the imaginary name of my process data. So what we do is, we just compute something on my data, store it in a new object. Now it only has 6 rows as opposed to the original rows. It were 32, I think. And now all we need to do to kind of create a copy in our local cache, local again, quote, server-side cache, shared cache in the server, is use the function pin. So that's all we need to do. It produces no output, but the pin is there. If you want to explore your local cache, then let's see that if we now want to say in a different script here, actually, there we go. So if we now say in a different session, actually I can restart my session if I wanted. And here, if I want to search for that, there is many ways. You already know, for example, to search in your connections, in Azure, in local, like in the local, you already see that in the local pin board, you have small data. So how could you do it programmatically? It's like this with pin find. I'm running it because you already used this function before. Here it is, data set. It exists in your local cache. This is not in Azure. This is in your local cache. And how could you use it? Well, with the function ping get, which you already know about. Again, anywhere in your, in your scripts, you could get that pin and start using it, right? So this is the data set. And finally, just for you to kind of know where pin stores the stuff, this is how you would create a path to the pins cache. This is what it looks like. In the case of our Studio server, in our Studio Cloud, it is stored under, this is the home kind of directory of the user in a folder called cache and then pins. You don't really need to know that, but I really wanted to show you a view. So let's explore the tree of that cache to see what pins is doing under the hood. So there is a local cache that pins created automatically for us. Here it's storing that data set that we call small data. And it's also storing the data in full as well, because we pinned it through the Azure board. So this is the structure. It's just a bunch of folders and a bunch of files that pins keeps track of. So that's the end of the lesson and the end of the meetup. It's exactly 9:30. So the takeaways, I would like you to type. So in your time, if you now need to run to the Data Herald meeting, then don't do it now. Please focus on that meeting. But I would like you to go back to the document whenever you can, sometime later today, and write some takeaways. There is a section dedicated to takeaways, and also some questions that you may have that we didn't have time to discuss in person. And finally, I didn't include that, but I will add a section for feedback. If you think that this format works or won't work for the Master the Tidyverse workshop, then give us some ideas about how we can change this format to a way that will suit you better. So with that, I say goodbye, and I keep reading the document to see what you have to say. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackson.
No worries. I'm going to stop recording now also, and the meeting is going to stop anyways in like 5 minutes.
Great. Bye-bye.
Yeah.